Actually, to be honest, I'm kind of tempted to just get started because the sessions are all 40 minutes, and that's not a lot of time. Does it seem short to you, too? Yeah, so I'm a little, to be honest, kind of stressed out about that because normally when they give me an hour, I don't think I've ever finished a presentation in my life. So cutting it down to 40 minutes, I tried to knock it down so that it would be a little bit more contained and fit into a nice 40-minute block, but we'll see what happens if I start racing by the end of the session. Forgive me, like I said, you've got the links to all the slides, even if the ones I don't get to, through that URL. Now, this whole session, the inspiration for it kind of came from an experience when I used to teach kindergarten at a small private school in Chicago. And at one point, they needed, the way I wound up getting into the technology thing was we had a web page, and I'm not exaggerating at all, the school web page was actually a series of JPEGs. Like literally, there was no text on the entire website. It was each page was a full JPEG because that's how they thought you were supposed to make web pages. And I said, no, you can actually have links and you can do other things with it. So by speaking up, they decided that I was now the webmaster and gave me the keys to the castle and said, make it better. So I started working on that. So first of all, the first lesson from this presentation is never, ever speak up. Ever. Okay? That's one big mistake. That led to starting to help out a little bit with repairing like printers and stuff in the technology department, and so while still doing kindergarten, but just kind of in the spare time. And then about 3 or 4 years later, the technology coordinator decided to go off to do another job. They had a job opening, and they asked whether I'd be interested in applying to be the director of technology. And I said, absolutely not. That sounds like the worst possible job in the entire world. And then they tried again, and then they tried again, and somehow or another they wore me down, and I grudgingly accepted the job, thinking, you know what, it might be kind of interesting. Now, it was interesting from a few different perspectives, but to me, the most interesting part about it was the students. This is a small private school in Chicago. To say we were a slice of life would be really quite an exaggeration because it's about as thin a slice as you could possibly get. I mean, these were students that were from like the upper 1% of the families. Our kindergarten, at the private school, was around 13 or 14,000 for half-day kindergarten per year, and this is like 15 years ago. You know what I mean? So it kind of tells you. Now, in theory, that's the students who are way above on the digital divide. These are students who are geared up for success. They are set for success. They are set up to be successful in just about every way, shape, or form. And you know what I found when I started working with them in the technology, especially the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders in the technology classes? They couldn't do a darn thing. You know why? Because when you asked them a question, when you gave them a task, they would stop and wait for step 1. And if you didn't give them step 1, they would sit there. They'd put their heads in their hands. They would raise their head and say, now what do we do? They couldn't, literally couldn't self-initiate. They couldn't just step out of the box and start thinking for themselves and ask questions. They wouldn't ask each other. And you know why? Because we had trained them that we will provide you the path to success. This is how you will get there. You will do this, and then you will do this, and then you will do this, and then you'll do this. And the trouble is, in a lot of classrooms, in a lot of technology environments, and a lot of lessons, we're still doing that. And it's hard. The hardest part about this, about breaking that kind of cycle is, you know what you want to teach. You want them to be successful. You create an experience for them that you know will work, and then they just sometimes have to jump through the hoops. And what I'm going to tell you is, when you set up an experience like that, when that's how the assignment runs, you're doing, in a sense, more harm than good. That's what we discovered. We were crippling our students without meaning to. We wound up actually literally throwing out the entire curriculum one year at that school, 6th, 7th through 8th grade technology curriculum, completely throwing out and rebuilding the entire thing from scratch to make it more open-ended, to foster this kind of thinking and so on. Now, a lot of the stuff that we wound up creating, honestly, came right back from where I was, the kindergarten classroom. I was incredibly influenced by Montessori, by a whole bunch of different movements. And I love this quote from Montessori. And by the way, forgive me, I just realized, this is a new presentation for me, and I just realized that when I was creating it, some of the images I forgot to trim back down to size to crop them right. So if it looks like it's off on the projector, don't blame him and them. It's totally my fault. All right, the greatest sign of success for a teacher is to be able to say, the children are now working as if I did not exist. You know what I mean? That you give them the challenge, you give them the task, you give them the inspiration and the impetus, and then you empower them to follow through. And that follow through may not always look exactly like what you expect it to, but at the same time, it's going to be much, much more meaningful. Now, we could talk about differentiation, and it might seem like that's kind of what we're talking about, differentiation, all kinds of different learning styles, and making sure we're accounting for social, auditory, musical, visual, verbal, and all this kind of stuff. And, we could have an argument back and forth about the validity of this, because there are some people who will argue very vehemently that this is totally fake, there's no research about it, and so on, differentiated instruction or learning styles and so on does not exist. And other people will say, oh, no, it's definitely true, because I know I am a visual learner, or I am an auditory learner, or I am a kinesthetic learner. And the reality is, it's probably somewhere in between. Because I think we all know ourselves that we learn some ways best. I can tell you this with authority. If I am in a session like this, a PD session, or just any sort of a classroom environment, I don't know what my learning style is, but I know if I don't have bandwidth, if I don't have access to the internet, my learning goes down the toilet. You know what I mean? Like, I have to, when the teacher says something, and I'm wondering if what they're saying is actually true or not, I have to be able to look it up right then, or I cannot get past it. You know what I mean? It's just, that's my learning style. That's just the way I function. So, I know that this may not be 100% true, but there's some validity to it. You know what I mean? There's something to it. Which is why I love the, quotes like this. I expect all of you to be independent, innovative, critical thinkers who will do exactly as I say. You know what I mean? And I feel like a lot of times this is the kind of thing that we're trying to chase. We're coming up with these innovation days and genius days and this kind of thing. And what we're trying to do is, we know the spirit of what we're trying to reach, but at the same time, we're trying to structure in a way that will be successful. And as soon as you go into it with that kind of a mindset, you're taking away a lot of the elements that actually make it powerful. It's kind of like one year we tried to, in one of our classrooms, a social studies classroom, we actually decided to throw away the textbook and allow the kids to invent their own digital textbook. This is way back in the days when wikis were first kind of coming into the forefront, and so we thought we'll have a wiki textbook and so on. So a social studies class, they created their own textbook. It went phenomenally well. The next time that class came around, we tried to use that textbook that they created. Absolute, utter failure. You know why? Because the class that was using it weren't the ones who created it. It wasn't the final product that was valuable. It wasn't the actual book that they created. It was the process of going through and making the decisions. What should be included? What shouldn't be included? How do you include it? How do you represent it? What should be the flavor? What should be the spin on it? All of those kinds of decisions. That was the crucial part of the instruction, and that's what you wound up missing by then just making use of that phenomenal project that was created the year before. So, we get to these kinds of questions. What is it that we actually want them to learn? How are they going to express or demonstrate what they've learned? And why on earth should it actually matter to them? Do those three questions sound familiar to anybody? What is it reference to? Does that sound familiar? UDL, Universal Design for Learning. That's essentially what UDL is all about. Yeah, so the what, the how, and the why. Those are the three kinds of things we are going to go through today. We are going to look at a few different ways to kind of express the what, and we're going to go through the how, and we're also hopefully going to get into some of the engagement kind of stuff. And wow, the Pebble Watch seems like a lot of fun until you get like 15 notifications and you just want to know what time it is. That has nothing to do with the session. You're not recording this, are you? Excellent. All right. Let's get into the what. What are the students going to be learning? Now, when we actually talk about the what, I'm not talking about the actual specific content. I'm talking about the nature, the degree, the structure of the content itself. Not the fact that they're learning calculus, but what is the actual information that they're going to be consuming. Now, 90% of the time, it's a textbook, or it's textbook-based. sometimes supplemented by things like media. But there are so many other slight variations in there that will resonate with some students versus another. I'll give you a very simple example. My son loves this book, How Do Dinosaurs Say Goodnight, right? And if you want a kid to read that book, right, you just think it's pretty simple. Give them the book, read it. Done, right? But then there's also the audio version of the book. We do have volume, right? Are you keeping the computer? Okay, good.
How does a dinosaur say goodnight when Papa comes in to turn off the light?
Now, some kids are going to gravitate to the audiobook because they're going to get the music, they're going to get the sound effects. It's slightly different, right? And then some other kids don't just want the audiobook, they want that combined with the actual text, the subtitles, so they can actually read it, especially for like ELL. Combining the written word with the auditory is pretty critical, right? Now we can take that one step further and we can actually go to the video itself.
Does he throw his teddy bear all about?
And then the same thing with the video. You know, you can also turn on the subtitles so they can actually see the written words to go along with the audio from the video, right? Which will come up any second now. It seemed a lot shorter when I was making it.
Does a dinosaur stomp his feet on the floor and shout, "I want to hear one book more"?
Now, here's what I think is kind of interesting. How many of you have read this book before? Did you have a conversation with your kid that the dinosaur actually represents a child? You know what I mean? Like, it's pretty obvious when you're thinking about it and while you're reading it, sure. But at the same time, in the video, you actually see it as a child and then the dinosaur subs in for it, which does change the value of it, does change the context of it in a sense. So right there, just between, on this slide, we've got 5 different ways to experience that exact same content. And you got a lot of students that are going to gravitate, you each in this room, some of you are going to gravitate to this method, some of you are going to gravitate to this method, some of you are going to gravitate to a different one. And here's the thing. If we're talking about this book and going to use this book for a project, who are we to say which is the right method? And if we have access to all of these different methods, why on earth aren't these kinds of choices available to our students for every single assignment that they're doing? It seems like a no-brainer. Just for the record, all of these things that I just grabbed, they all are within, all right, I'm assuming most of you know I work for Discovery Education Streaming, right? If you guys didn't know, I'm just going to say flat out, I work for Discovery. I will be using some of their stuff as examples. You don't want to use Discovery, you don't have access to it, fine, I don't care. There's a lot of other options that are out there. There's YouTube, there's Audible, there's all kinds of different things out there. So just in your mind, swap out the words Discovery Education for something else, okay? And then we will all be happy and simpatico and so on. So the whole point is, all of this kind of stuff is in here. We actually have now transcripts for every single one of our videos, and if you click on a line in the transcript, it takes you directly to that point in the video. So for students that are struggling with language comprehension and so on, with ELL and so on, they can actually click on those words and get taken right to that point in the story. That's powerful, powerful stuff. And a lot of times you don't think about those kinds of options when you're just thinking like, well, we're going to be studying this kind of book. You know what I mean? It's important to kind of give it to them. And not only that, but also, once you start going into digital, then you start changing the paradigm too. Because when you're reading, that's really, for the most part, the main thing that you're going to be focusing on is the words and the pictures and so on. But once you switch over to the audiobook or the video, then they can start to also handle some different kinds of tasks. You can actually give them, prep them to comprehend that information in different ways. We have a whole series going on our blog right now called SOS, Spotlights on Strategies. And what the entire series is all about is using digital media in the classroom techniques for doing more than just playing the video and expecting students to just watch it and learn. More than just going far, far, far beyond that. And I'll give you a concrete example, okay? This right here, we're actually prepping for a trip to Japan in the near future, me and my family. So, this is one of the things that me and my son just watched fairly recently, okay? This is from Discovery Atlas Japan Revealed, right? So, while watching this video is about 1 minute long. We're going to use a strategy called AEIOU. A is an adjective. Think about a word or two that describes something that you saw or learned from the video. E is for emotion. Describe a particular part, how a particular part of the segment made you feel. I is interesting. Write something that you found that was interesting about the topic. O, something that caused you to say, oh. And write a question about what you wanted to learn more about. So I'm going to play this video. I want you to each think about those 5 things while you're watching the video, and then I will ask for feedback.
Like the secret world of the geisha, in Japan, it is often what is hidden that is considered the most beautiful. Yoshihiro Nakano knows more about this than anyone. He is more famously known as Horiyoshi III, and he is one of the greatest tattoo artists in the world.
In the Oriental arts, we say, the more something hides, the more beautiful it becomes. The fact that you only see it on very special occasions gives it more impact. It's more attractive and shocking when unveiled. I think that's part of our traditional culture, and without knowing it, the Japanese appreciate that sense of beauty.
Horiyoshi has tattooed rock stars and Yakuza gangsters, all with a 45-needle stick he designed himself. Historically, tattoos were outlawed, with one unusual exception.
Firemen were well known for their tattoos, because theirs was the only profession officially allowed to have them. Normally, tattooing was illegal, particularly for those with jobs that involved public duty like rescuing people. But firemen were overlooked as an exception. If they died in a fire, the tattoo would help people identify their body.
Yeah, a little morbid, right? But kind of interesting. All right, so someone give me an adjective to describe this video. Interesting. No, absolutely. Another one? Some words to describe something that you saw or learned. Colorful. All right, what about emotion? How did a particular moment in the segment make you feel? Nervous. See, that's interesting. Another one? Pain. Interesting. Something you found interesting about the topic. Never heard it? What else? Anyone else? What? That tattoos were illegal. Yeah. And something that made you say, oh. 45 needles. Yeah, kind of stands out. And any questions that somebody had about the segment? Why did they become legal? When did that switch over, and what was the reasons for that? Yeah. So basically, all we're doing is providing a construct for active experiencing this. You know what I mean? So instead of just watching the video and switching over to that phase 2 or beta waves, that kind of a thing, to actually give them something that grounds them a little bit. You know, using technology, there's a lot of different tools that are going to allow you to do this as well. Things like Padlet, things like a back channel, things like Edmodo or 81-, those kinds of things. So we actually have, like I said, about 30 or 40 of these different strategies that we're coming out with a web series to go along with them as well. But the whole point is, there's a lot of different ways to go about learning about this. I mean, we could have just pulled up Japan and read about that in a textbook. There's also the video, there's also the audio, there's also different books related to it and stories and so on. The idea here is we need to separate the content from the actual structure of that content in a sense, and also the means that they're going to use to demonstrate that for us. So in other words, if the goal is for them to learn about Japan, I don't care whether they learn about it from a book, from a video, from something auditory, from a magazine, from Wikipedia, maybe whatever. You know what I'm talking about. I don't care how they do it, and I'll be honest, I don't care how they express it, so long as they are adequately able to demonstrate their knowledge back to me. The whole focus for me is that they are learning about Japan and the culture. There are other times where the goal is for them to learn digital storytelling. When they're learning digital storytelling, I don't care what the content is in that instance. I want them to learn the mechanics and the technical end of video editing and how to craft a good story and so on. So the content is something completely different. So whichever one your goal is, the other side of it is completely open to student choice. I don't care what you're teaching. Half of what you're doing can be 100% driven by students. The opportunity is there, so long as we just kind of flip these sorts of models. I'll give you one other example of this. When my son was learning how to write, you go through the motion. It's the same thing with math and anything else, just about anything else that requires an element of repetition and so on. When he's learning his letters, he is going to trace those letters, right? But he needs to do it pretty often, because in order to learn how to do the letter A, you need to do it again and again and again and again and again. Using the iPad, we use this app, we use that app, we use one that allowed you to do cars, another one that allowed you to do airplanes, and so on and so forth. To him, they were all different, new, and interesting. And he got to pick which ones he did and which ones he spent the time on. I did not care which app he was using. Why? Because I was focused on him actually learning the actual letters themselves and the fine motor coordination, right? That's where my focus was. And given that's what I wanted to focus on, the other side of it was entirely driven by him. Whether he painted in the air, whether he did it with a paintbrush, whether he did it with a pen, a marker, a crayon, and so on and so forth, that whole part was up to him. That was all choice, so long as the actual content is what came back to me. That's the beauty of technology. And there are so many different tools out there nowadays that allow us to do that. That's why me and Adam over there, we wrote this book together called Untangling the Web. And the whole idea was we were trying to find these websites that allowed, they weren't specific or perfect for just this one subsection of the educational community. They were broad enough that they could be used by just about any classroom, any student, in any situation. That was what the whole idea was, that they were flexible enough. We've got so many different ways to express knowledge nowadays. Interactive writing, ebooks, podcasts, stories, narrator, screencasts, and so on and so forth. When you look at this, it's so easy for teachers to feel overwhelmed, to feel like there is so much choice out there. And the last thing you want to do as a teacher is to feel like things are out of control. So what you don't want to do is just say, I'm going to be teaching Japan, now demonstrate it for me, and you can use anything. Because especially with students that have never done this, you are going to get that same picture. The student puts their head in the hand because they're overwhelmed, they don't know what to do. And you also get the teacher that's overwhelmed because they don't know exactly how to foster this, how to mentor it, and so on. So at first, when you first start going by this path, yes, you structure it. Yes, you scaffold it. Yes, you only give them one choice. But the next time you do it, you give them three. Three new ones. And they're not allowed to use the one they did before. You know what I mean? And the next time you do it, I'll make them make a different choice so that every time they're giving information back to you, they're making a different choice. And you know what happens? They start to become platform agnostic. That's what happens. They start to become platform agnostic. They start to realize that, you know what, there's going to be a lot of different ways that I can express that knowledge, and it doesn't really matter to me which one I choose. I will start getting used to them, and you start figuring out which one works best for which situation and so on. Another example of this, at least what I love in terms of if you actually want to try and foster this with your students, is things like the Daily Create. I don't know how many of you have heard of DS-106. DS-106 is a digital storytelling class that anybody can jump into at any time. And one of the things that they have is a digital create. Every single day of the year, you can go here, and there will be a new assignment. A new creative opportunity. Sometimes it will be writing, sometimes it will be photography, sometimes it will be video. And sometimes it's not exactly the most stellar thing in the world. This is a 5-in-1 story. I can't even read it on my screen, okay? Sometimes they're really simple things. But what they do is they start to open up these avenues, open up these new pathways, give you new ideas for how to demonstrate knowledge and demonstrate understanding. They start filling up that toolbox, giving you new options. Another related thing that they have to this, if you actually just want to kind of drill in, don't want to just do the daily one with your students, is what they call the DS-106 Assignment Bank. And I just realized I don't have the URL on here, but if you do a search for that, DS-106 Assignment Bank, you will find it. In fact, you know what? You guys want to see it real quick? We'll jump over here. This is where they've collected all the assignments that they have had created over the years. Okay? Now, This weren't just created by the instructors for the course, they're also created by the students. So, visual, design, audio, video, web, mashup, fan fiction, writing assignments, animated GIFs, or 3D printed assignments. We could pick one of those. How about we go to visual assignments? Okay? And how about I get online? Hold on a second. Go away. Go back. Visual assignments. What? You can't see that. Thank you. That's lovely. Arrangement, mirror displays. Some people just let me go. All right, so we'll do that. We'll do this. Here we go. Assignment bank, okay? So these are all different assignments that you could do for visuals. So for example, this one is structured parkour, different faces. How about different faces of stress? Come on, internet, don't fail me now. Click. I'm totally like a middle school student. If it doesn't work the first time, I just keep clicking. The different faces of stress get at least 3 photos of people, with their permission, of course, to depict different levels of stress, right? Just a really simple visual assignment for the students to kind of go after. And depending on the assignment itself, you can see how many people have completed this assignment, and you can actually see all of their responses, right? They literally have hundreds of these assignments. Past and present, comparing the past and present. Take a picture of a mother and father and compare it to either yourself or a sibling posed in the same position at the same age or close to it. You know what I mean? So if you're looking for a creative way to start using photography in the classroom, here you go. You've got about 100 different potential assignments to choose from. Now, of course, that's one way you can start working this sort of thing in, right? Because you could just simply select one of these assignments and have the students start going after it. Now, what I also love is that if you choose any one of these different assignments, where am I? Click. There we go. One of the other options is there's actually a button on the page when you click through to it that says Remix. Remix, which will give you a suggestion for taking that exact same assignment and providing a different spin to it. So in this case, the initial assignment was a 30-second documentary using Legos, doing a 30-second Lego animation of documentary of a specific topic. Now, if we wanted to try and spin that or make it slightly more complicated or slightly different, we could remix it by saying turn up the cheese, use the worst ever over-the-top design elements in the assignment, using Arial and poor fonts and poor coloring and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? Just a slightly, there's another one that says, make it a gangster style, or make it, like in the 60s, or a period piece, or combine it with the 50s, that sort of a thing. You know what I mean? Which all just adds some certain layers of complexity, changes it around, adds some creativity to it. Does not change the initial assignment, it just adds a spin to it. And you know what that got me thinking? How cool is that for them to just be able to allow that little limited element of choice? It's kind of like when they're doing a PowerPoint assignment and they realize, wow, I can change the font. And to them, that's a big deal. You know what I mean? That's exciting to them because all of a sudden they're exhibiting this sense of ownership over it. You know what I mean? You can't necessarily do that in blocks, but in digital, we certainly could do that. So why aren't we allowing students to remix the assignments that we give them? So long as, if we give them an assignment and we're focusing, let's say, on Japan, why not allow them to remix that assignment somewhat? So long as they're still learning about Japan, when they give it back to us, if they put a different spin on it, they have a little fun with it, so long as they're demonstrating the content, demonstrating the understanding, why not? So why not give them an actual license, a license to remix? Give them an actual ticket that allows them to remix any assignment given to you once per term. Every single student, you give them the assignment, and they get one opportunity to remix it for the class, to put a slightly different spin on it. It's still the same content. It's still the same heart. They can't actually change the heart of the assignment per se, but they give it a different spin. That gives them a sense of control over even when there's things that you need to get to. There are things that, from the Common Core, there are standards, there are all these different things that you have to get that are not optional, where you can't just throw out the curriculum and just say, we're going to have a genius week and you're just going to get to do whatever you want. You may not be able to do that, but you may be able to give them that sense of ownership, that sense of choice. You know what I mean? That's the kind of the key to it. I have this slide in a lot of my presentations, that I no longer give my students assignments. Instead, I give them creative briefs. I love that quote. There's an educator in Pennsylvania that first shared that with me. And what I love about this is, then typically we tell them, here's what we're going to learn, and here's how you're going to give it back to me. What this shift that this does is it says, here's the heart of what we're going to learn. Now demonstrate it for me. If we want it to be a PowerPoint, great. If you want it to be a diorama, great. If you want it to be a song or a dance or whatever, a music video, fantastic. So long as you can demonstrate your knowledge back to me. There are so many different ways to go about doing it. That's why we added into Discovery Education at the beginning of this year something called Board Builder. Board Builder is nothing more than taking your digital poster board, the typical one that you would do for a science fair or something like that, but doing it digital. It's sort of like Glogster, except without some of the hassle of Glogster in a sense. You know what I mean? And so what people can do is they can actually create these digital poster boards where it actually combines images, text, video, audio from us, from the students, from whatever, and allows them to have these digital poster boards. And this is one of those things that everybody's kind of focusing on. I love this quote from, I think it was the Wisconsin Department of Education. That text is any communication, spoken, written, or visual. In an increasingly visual and online world, students need to be able to interpret and create text that combine words, images, and sound in order to make meaning of text that no longer read in one clear, linear direction. Learning is no longer linear. Why is the stuff that they exhibit back to us? Why are the ways that they demonstrate their learning? Why do those have to be linear? And they don't. This is someone's project on polymers. She's demonstrating what a polymer is. You've got the text over there. You've got a video about it that someone else created, professionally created video in there, along with the subtitle. You have an explanation of why she included that video, that little purple thing in the corner down here. That is her audio explaining why she included this in there. And then right below that, you also have the step-by-step instructions for how you make a polymer and so on. And you could jump to any point in this poster board and you can see how she's demonstrating her understanding of polymer. You don't need to read it in a linear way. She's sharing all this different types of knowledge with you. You know what I mean? And it's combining video and audio and written and so on. The pre-structured, the structured stuff and, the stuff that she creates. I always go back to the early elementary. That's just where I'm at. You know what I mean? And so another example of this is Harold and the Purple Crayon. I love this book. My son loved this book. So I use this as an example a lot. You ready? Harold and the Purple Crayon. If you're not familiar with it, Harold gets a purple crayon. He takes it. He draws things. The drawings kind of come alive and he interacts with the pages. It's a lot of fun. Okay? So we read the book. And once we finished the book, we watched the video. And we watched him actually drawing these things and the drawings actually coming to life. And when he was done watching the video, we decided to make our own. And so you get these drawings, and then we actually combine these drawings into an actual physical book to mimic that book, right? Now another way to kind of experience it and demonstrate his knowledge, his understanding, or his conceptual understanding of this story is to take that same drawing and to do it in a digital way using something like KidPix, right? And of course, if we want to take it one step further, we can actually take it and actually animate it, right? This is something using ABC. Are you guys familiar with ABC? If you didn't know about ABC, it's a wonderful website for all sorts of things, but my favorite thing inside ABC is they have an animation engine, right? You think Walt would be proud of me for making that? Yeah, I was very proud of myself. All right, I won't admit how long it took me to make that. All right, ABC, and then of course I can take all of those different drawings, all those different things, and combine them actually into one board. So I have my own animation, I have my own written ones, the hand-drawn ones, the other ones, and then him explaining the whole story that goes along with it. Just in case you haven't seen ABC real quick, I think I have it there. This is ABC. It is basically a poor man's Flash. It is completely free. So I can take this, I can say, all right, copy, new frame, select. I want this guy to go over here, and I'm going to have him move over there, new frame. I'm going to select this and have him go over here now, new frame. And I'm going to select this and have him go over here. And then I click play, and now all of a sudden I'm going to have this new little change right there at the end where he bounces back up and down. Really ultra simple, but this is animation that the students can do. If this is beyond them, well, then you've also got things like Draw a Stickman, which I love. I love Draw a Stickman. I never get tired of this. You ready? Draw a Stickman. You click on episode 1, and you ready? You have to. This is very complicated stuff. You have to draw a stickman. You ready? So here's my stickman. Little smile. We draw, and we give him... Okay, so I'm not great at drawing a stickman, all right? No photos of this. Don't tweet this one out. All right. Draw a stickman, and now we take my stickman, and it doesn't matter how good or bad it is. Hey, look, a box. And now he's going to walk over there. What can I do with this? Can you draw a key in my hand? Why, yes, sir, I can. So I will draw a really fancy key, draw a little handle on it, and then look, he's going to go over. You see what I mean? So this ties right in with another way to kind of experience. It bridges from the static image to the animation. It kind of falls into there. And that's the beauty of this. There are so many different ways to accomplish the same thing. It's no different than on the iPad using a car to trace that letter or an airplane to trace that letter and so on. It's just that there's so many different options along this continuum. We can go from this to ABC to animated, and then we could take that and we could bump it up to Flash, and depending on where they're at, they've got so many different options. Why on earth would we tell them, you will just draw a picture and we will make a class book out of it? You know what I mean? How limiting is that? In today's day and age, we don't need to. We don't need to. And all kinds of different options. You know, I didn't mention this before, but in terms of board builder and all that kind of stuff, if you didn't know, and if you have Discovery Education, every single one of your students has an account. You just may not know it yet. It's included with Discovery Education. They all can have their own individual accounts that they can log in. They can save their own favorites. They can search the videos. They can download things and so on. If you don't know about that, you should find out more about it. Just look for under Classroom Manager or email me or something like that. I love this. You know, listen, you can say what you will about the Common Core and so on, but at the same time, at the heart of it all, if you boil it all down, the spirit of it is fantastic in a lot of ways. But this is one of the Common Core tenets. With guidance and support from adults, explore a variety of digital tools to produce and publish writing, including in collaboration with peers. What grade level is that? Kindergarten. That's kindergarten. If in kindergarten we're expecting them to produce and publish writing in collaboration with peers using a variety of digital tools, then what the heck do you expect them to do in 8th grade? You know what I mean? That's kind of the point. The stuff that I'm talking about right now, I'm not talking about when they're in middle school. I'm talking about that they should be doing this in kindergarten. In kindergarten, they should have the option of whether they want to just draw it or do an audio voiceover or create an actual video or create a stop motion. They can do it. They have the capability. The tools themselves are free. The only thing that's stopping it is the red tape in our own heads. That's the irony. Other tools will do the same sort of thing. Padlet, I don't have time to get into. Zaption, same sort of thing. If you haven't seen Zaption, write that one down. You can take videos and you can embed in them these trigger points where it will pause and it will show you a question. And it can be open-ended. It's sort of like YouTube meets Kahoot in a sense, where as you're watching the video, it will pause, ask a question for them to think about and to respond to. They can type in their response, and then you can see all the responses that the students have done afterwards. Really, really cool. It plays great with YouTube, and it also plays great with Discovery Education because they worked out a way that you can upload your videos and still kind of keep them private and so on, so you can just use it with your students and not republish them, right? And the whole reason we do all these kinds of things is it prevents this. It prevents the students from not being engaged. It's giving them options. It's trying to meet them where they are, right? That's what we want to do. We want to know what our students are curious about. We want to know what drives their thinking. We want to know what they're passionate about and let them work that into the things that you're going to be learning about anyway. I don't have time to really play this video, but we do this thing every year called the Young Scientist Challenge, and I love this because what it does is it gives students a reason to pursue their passions regardless of whether they're doing it in their science class or not. It encourages young inventors to follow, a path. So if they have, they see an opportunity. One of the projects that was one of the finalists last year was they were looking at people who are in wheelchairs and thinking to themselves, well, those wheelchairs, they turn a lot. And you know what? If something is turning like that a lot, there's a lot of energy that could be captured. There's potential energy there. So what one of them did was they actually invented a way to harness that energy and use that to actually power up devices or power up a laptop as they're just moving around like they would do normally. That kind of a thing. One of our other students who won this contest a couple years ago, they actually created a better sandbag. A sandbag that wasn't full of sand, it was full of a polymer that when it got wet, expanded. That's it. The sandbags were lighter, they were smaller, they were more compact, they were easier to deploy much, much more quickly. And after something like Katrina, people realized we could do this better. You know what I mean? It's more efficient. And now the sandbag that he created is actually being used. You know what I mean? So that's why I love contests like that. And everything about it basically drives back to, are we letting our students ask questions? Are we letting their questions and the answer to those questions actually drive what they're doing in the classroom, or at least fostering that, empowering them, getting them to. I love this website called 101cues.com, 101 cues, 101 questions. It just shows an image or a video and then says, all right, what's the first question that comes to mind? Someone tell me the first question that comes to mind when you look at that. Is it real? That's the first one. What's the next one? How many balloons? To do what? To lift it, absolutely. How many balloons would it take to lift that? I love this. When you actually look through some of the other questions that were there, you do see how many balloons does it take to lift it? Is it real? Can that really happen? And I love that one from John Fisher. If I had a propeller, would it actually be faster to travel this way or in the actual water? Interesting question, isn't it? And now, how are you going to test it? How are you going to try and figure that out? Jan Abernathy, one of our Den stars, does a fantastic project called Make Something New, where she encourages, sort of like that genius hour per se, where she actually encourages each of her students to step back and actually choose a project to actually dive into and learn something about. One of the students created a coat hook out of deer antlers and so on and so forth. But here's the beauty of it. You know what? This is homework. This is the ongoing project that they do at home. She gives parents the structure. She gives them the impetus. She tells them why we are doing it. She gives them the learning objectives, and she doesn't waste her classroom time on it. She gives them the hook. They get to present it in class. You know what I mean? And it's something they can pursue throughout the course of the year, semester, term, and so on and so forth. You know, I love Genius Hours. I love Innovation Days. But what I love even more is when it has an actual practical end to it. We were talking last night over dinner. I thought, wouldn't it be kind of fun to take Genius Hour and switch it over to Evil Genius Hour, okay? How are you going to take this and what you create from it, how are you going to use it to take over the world? You know what I mean? And interestingly, some of these people that participate in this, they are. There's a girl named Lily Bourne. I'm on the school board at my son's local school district in Skokie, Illinois. 3 schools in our school district. That's it. Illinois is a strange state. I will tell you that much, okay? She went to our junior high, and while in our junior high, she invented this cup. She put it out on Kickstarter. She got it funded. 1,800 people bought this cup. You know what this cup is? It's a way for her grandfather with Parkinson's to be able to drink independently and put it down without it ever being able to spill. Yeah, think about it. It's got those 3 legs on it. There is no way to put down that cup and have it spill. You know what I mean? Unless you actually literally put it upside down. But he can just slam it down and it'll be totally fine. So that's why, and it turns out it's actually really good for kids and so on. So they did it initially as a Kickstarter and so on. She was just recently honored by CNN as one of the 30 heroes under 30. It's a phenomenal story. And you know what it all came from? Sitting in class and saying, hey, can you think of a better way to do it? Is there something you have a question with? Is there something you have a passion for? And do you have the impetus to pursue it? You know, I'm not going to be able to get into things like Trello. I'm not going to talk about 1 second every day. But the whole question is, who in your classroom is the actual star of the show? The actual star of the show. And if the star of the show is the student, then they ought to have some choice in what the show is going to wind up looking like. And if you want a concrete example of why that's so significant, just think about this. Remember that ALS water challenge, right? It's the same darn thing every single time, right? They're just going to have a bucket of water poured on their head. And yet, why, when your friends or family did it, why did you watch it every single time? Why? Because everybody did it just a little different. Because everybody found a way to take it and make it their own. And think about that when you think about what we teach them in the classroom. How are your students having the opportunity to take the exact same experience and spin it just a little bit so that they can take it and make it their own, putting them first with technology? Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you had fun.